Welcome to my channel. Click on the little red button to subscribe to my channel and click on the little bell notification icon to be notified. What's the biggest plot twist you've seen in real life? 1991, I'm 19, just signed the lease for my first solo apartment, just got the first paycheck from my new job, deposit the paycheck at an ATM, another first. I'd always gone into the bank to do it. 2 weeks later, I get my bank statement in the mail and see with horror I only have $1.87 in my account. Way wrong, I should have at least $200. I've been very careful with my spending. I'm freaked. I came within $2 of bouncing my first rent check. I'm literally reaching for the phone to call the bank when the phone rings. It's the police asking if my ATM card was stolen. I check my wallet and the card is missing. My job at a theater pub came with cash, tips so I didn't use the card often, and tell them I was going to call them anyway because I was missing $200 from my account. Well, we've got your card and your $200, so come down to the police station, they tell me. I can't figure out how they have my card and the cash. It doesn't make sense. I drive down there. Detective says, let's call him Bob. Pulls into an ATM and saw a man acting suspiciously while he was using it, moving back and forth as if trying to dodge the camera. Bob says the man then left the ATM, got into a car and drove away at high speeds as if fleeing. Bob then went to the ATM, put his card, which popped out. Bob then withdrew $200 and then another ATM card popped out. My card. Bob's card had popped out because the crook had left my card in the ATM before speeding away. Bob realized he had withdrawn the money from my account and not his, so he brought my card and the cash to the police and reported the attempted theft. The detective gives me the description of the crook. According to Bob, it was a 5'7", brown hair, round gold trimmed glasses. I say out loud, so about my height, my color, hair, glasses like mine, before realizing Bob was actually describing me. I've never deposited a check in an ATM before, so I was moving back and forth, following the instructions on the screen, filling out the envelope with my account number, punching the account in, etc. I then forgot to take my card out and just left because I'm a freaking idiot. I drove away at high speeds because I was 19 and that's how I drove everywhere. Worried the detective might be annoyed, I didn't tell him I was the crook. I just thanked him and left with the money I stole from myself. Somewhere in the box in my closet, I still have a police report where I'm both the victim and the perp. The little town I grew up had these two car dealerships on opposite sides of town, one Chevy, one Ford. They were bitter rivals. Attack ads, crap talking salesmen, billboard words, you name it. When the owner of the Chevy dealership died, it came out he also owned the Ford dealership by way of a shell company. No one saw that coming, including a lot of the higher-ups who worked at the dealerships. I graduated law and got engaged to the girl I had been with through university. We both applied for the same graduate program and ended up working in the same office in Canberra. 3 months before our wedding, I found out she was cheating on me with our mutual boss and I broke it off with her. Long story short, it got really ugly and two of us ended up in a very bitter court case over property. Canberra is a very small city and the legal world is pretty bloody small there. To and everywhere I went, I bumped into my ex. It was beginning to seriously get me down, her too as it transpired, and I applied for an Australian government overseas development job in Tuvalu, a private island with about 11,000 population. It's quite a prestigious job to get, with only 2 positions offered for a 2-year contract on a rotating basis. I was successful in the application and moved on island to start my posting, to discover that my ex was the other successful applicant. I spent the next 2 years sharing a tiny office on a tiny island with the person I quite honestly loathed more than any other in the world. I was a Starbucks barista before the whole name on cups thing was big, or at least it wasn't really practiced in my tiny store. There was this very cute guy who came in maybe 4 to 6 times a week. A little often, but nothing out of the ordinary. I flirted like mad. He flirted back. It was all great. Then he comes in with his fiancée. I was betrayed and treated him very cold. A month later, the two come in together and I found out that they are twins, and I shot down any chance I had with a single one. I knew a woman who was going through the divorce proceedings with her husband. He was always argumentative and borderline abusive towards her, certainly always shouting and demeaning. Then just as the divorce was entering its final stages, he very suddenly died. His autopsy showed that he had a massive undiagnosed brain tumor which had been physically altering his personality. His wife felt all kinds of guilty afterwards and took it on everyone she talked to and lost a lot of friends in the process. My grandfather's funeral. He was always fairly reserved and a bit distant father as far as I understood. He would fit the stereotype of a northern dock worker who comes home expecting dinner to be in the table and then goes to the pub all evening via the bookies. Anyways, an unsurprising heart attack later, we all gathered for his funeral. We're a big but close family, so we know everyone, including his friends. However, one guy turns up around the same age as my dad and his siblings who nobody knows. Long story short, it turns out it was my grandfather's son from another family, from another marriage that went on for as long as his marriage to my grandmother. My grandfather had maintained 2 marriages over 40 years, having 7 children with my grandmother and just the one with his other women. They knew about our family and kept away, and apparently my grandmother knew about them but kept quiet. Turns out he wasn't going to the pub every night. I work at a prison and a lady flew all the way from Nigeria to visit her brother who was supposed to be incarcerated at my unit. She speaks little English, but we tried to explain to her that the inmate was not in the system anymore. He must have been released. We called supervisor and turns out he was released over 5 months before. She walks away confused and comes back with her husband who speaks English much better. We tell him the scenario and he asks where did he go. He doesn't have any friends or family in the US. We told him we don't know where he went and he was released, he could be anywhere. The guy, obviously confused, says well, he couldn't have gone anywhere because he doesn't have any legs. So a legless Nigerian ex-felon with no ties is running scooting around the US and no one knows where he is. A few years ago, I got invited to a friend's engagement party. They were throwing a huge bash because they were planning on a very small destination wedding. Later in the evening, my friend's fiancée takes the mic and starts thanking everyone for being there. Sorry Jen, we'll be out there to thank you guys in a minute. She's just having a wardrobe malfunction. He goes on to tell the story how they met, how they were best friends, and decided to get engaged. And along the lines as, we wish you could all be here and that we would get married right now. So we're going to. Out walks Jen in her wedding dress. One of my good friends in high school started hanging out with this guy from the other public high school in our city, and before long they were basically joined at the hip. She had a huge crush on him and was pretty much sure he liked her too, but she never had a boyfriend before and was too shy to make the first move. One night they were hanging out together and he told her that he had something huge to confess. He was gay. They remained close friends. Then a few months later at a party, the guy introduced all of us to his younger by 1 year brother. The dude and his brother looked similar, had similar personalities and the exact sense of humor. Fast forward 20 years, and my friend is happily married to the brother. The best friend is the brother-in-law, and he and his husband are godfathers to her kids. Sometimes the painful crush on the gay dude pays off. I used to call my tutor Mr. for the first 8 months of tutoring just to find out she was a woman. My mom and a gal pal went to Mexico for a break during college. They had a great time. While boarding the return flight, her friend said, "Sorry, I'm staying," and runs off. My mom hears from her a few weeks later after not being able to contact her. This was the 70s. Long distance calls and phones were scarce. Turns out her friend has been sneaking off nights and effing the hotel gardener. She loves him and stayed in Mexico. That's all my mom knows. Hopefully they live together happily ever after. Update: I found out the woman's name and believe I found the correct one on social media. She got married in 1979, which lines up with the story, where she lives in Green Bay, Wisconsin now. I once had a job interview. It was very early in my career, and I was trying to move 500 miles to a new place. I built prototypes and brought samples of my work. It was a 9-hour drive, but everyone seemed so enthusiastic that I figured it was a lock. I did not get the job. I found another job in the area, and I took it. 6 months later, they called and asked me to interview for the job above one I had applied for. I was given an offer on the spot and worked there for almost a decade. The first few months, the people there told me that was the guy who I would have been my boss if he hired me initially, had actually said the samples and work I did was beyond him, and he didn't want an employee who knew more than him. Well, I guess he doesn't have that problem since they fired him and replaced him with me. The one guy I worked with was having a baby. He told me about his girlfriend. Yeah, she's pretty big, but she's amazing. She's the one for me. I didn't know him very well, but as we talked about the pregnancy and so forth, I gave him encouraging words about how his life was going to change. So much we bonded a bit. His baby was going to be born right before Christmas. He missed our work X's party because his baby was being born. We expect him to be gone for paternity leave, but he shows up a few days later. I feared the worst, that the baby had died. It turned out his girlfriend was lying about being pregnant to spend more time with him. I didn't think much of it at the time, but the fact that he brought up that she was fat for no reason must have meant that she was so fat you couldn't tell whether she was pregnant or not. She showed him someone else's ultrasound. They talked about how they would name their baby, how they take care of it, all of that crap. I don't know what she thought was going to happen, but 9 months passed and no baby. I guess it's good she came out clean. A more diabolic person would have faked a miscarriage or something. That was seriously messed up. Shortly after the dude left, I don't really know how he handled it. I was out with a friend of mine who ran into her dad and his other family. We worked at a small company summers during college. 2 dudes that worked together, Mike and John, are best friends since high school, and Mike is getting married to his high school sweetheart. 9 months after the wedding, the girl has a baby. It looks nothing like Mike, but a lot like John. And she reveals that she had sex with John on her wedding day, before she actually got married. She divorces Mike, marries John the next day, and Mike and John are not friends anymore.